Welcome to the Essential Dynamics podcast. I'm Derek Hudson. Essential Dynamics is a framework I've been working on to help us work through our trickiest opportunities. And in this podcast, we test the concepts of essential dynamics through deep conversations with interesting people. And I'm delighted to have Travis Anderson back on for another episode. Travis is a very interesting person. We had a great conversation about culture and football at our last meeting, and we're back for more. Travis, thanks for coming back on.
Excited to be here again.
So Travis, we talked about the importance of culture. We talked about the word that I was fixated on, energy, and how culture can give you access to energy. One of the phrases you use is culture by design as opposed to culture by default.
Yeah.
So every organization has a culture. So if you didn't design it, then it's by default. If you were the leader of an organization, if you were a new leader of an organization that had a problematic culture, what would be some of the things you'd want to include in your design of that culture?
You know, that's a great question because that's the question I've been thinking about and talking about and researching for the last 30 years. And the thing I love about it is there's no cookbook answers, but what I have found is there's literally 8 keystones of culture, what I like to call foundational, that I think every effective culture, one way or another, needs to be aware of in order to truly create that sense of purpose, right? And that sense of connection, that sense of unity that I talked about in our last episode. And I'll just go over, I'll just tell them really quickly and just spend a little time on the first couple because we don't have time to go through them all. But I just want to give you a brief overview because they're fascinating to me because these keystones in culture not only work in companies, not only in sports teams, but they also work in families. Whenever you have 2 or more people, right? Whenever you even have a marriage, any group, any partnership, 2 or more people, these keystones and being aware of them and using them to build culture can be extremely effective. The first thing is to have a sense of clarity around a cause. And what I mean by clarity around a cause is I'm talking about a deep-seated sense of clarity around purpose and what it is that you're about. What is it that really gets you up in the morning, right? And what is it that you can rally around? Like we talked about in our last session, it was bigger than football with the University of Utah. It's about we're doing this. We're creating a connection. We are creating excellence together. Right, that's what it's about, and creating a strong bond of brotherhood. They consider themselves family, and that's that overarching cause, right? That's that overarching sense of clarity around purpose. And
so I like your alliteration, clarity around cause.
Yeah,
but purpose is a good word too.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely, and I think they're pretty much the same. The only thing that's different about cause is it's in my mind even a deeper iteration of what a purpose is. Sometimes you think of purpose is just an overall long-term objective. A cause is something that burns in your heart.
Sure, and energy. Yeah, a deep purpose that's something that means something and probably that means something for somebody else.
Yes, absolutely, and quite honestly, that's exactly right. That it's not about you, it's about us. That's the thing I love about a cause, and that's why it can be applied in your families and in companies and in sports. What's interesting too, I'll go over the other 6 really quickly, the other 7, and then we'll come back and talk about whatever one you want. But the second one is creating common language and using common language / shared activities. You cannot create a sense of teamwork or a sense of togetherness without doing things together and without having common language.
Yeah.
And so number 2 is having common language. Number 3 is stories. People don't realize that intentionally sharing stories is one of the most powerful ways you build culture. And again, we can go in depth with that, but just know that those personal stories is what people remember. You can have all kinds of processes, and you can have all kinds of words, and you can have all kinds of statistics and analysis, but I tell you what people remember are stories. Right? So number 3 are stories. Number 4 are symbols. Symbols, good example of those are, you take football, for example. So many symbols in football. You have a team. You got the Utes, right? You have a logo, University of Utah Utes, and that's a powerful one because they have an incredible partnership with the Ute tribe, and they're very proud of that because there's certain beliefs of the Ute Indian tribe, Native Indians, and that they prescribe, that they live up to. And then, of course, where would Nike be without the swoosh? Where would Apple be without the apple? Yeah. I'm just a big believer that symbols are so powerful, not only in terms of logos, but so many other things that can make a difference. In addition to symbols, then you have traditions, right? You have traditions. And one good example of a tradition is I work with a lot of steel manufacturing and erection, one in particular, erection company, and one of the traditions that they have is a topping off party. After they built, a 60-story hotel in Las Vegas or wherever, and they also built the Los Angeles Rams Stadium and whatever else. The last beam, the highest beam, is that they paint it white and they have a little Christmas tree on one side, and we don't have time to go into that, but there's a symbol and a purpose for that, an American flag on the other, and it's white, and everyone signs their name for the people that were on that team. Are you familiar with that?
No, but I get the value of everyone signing their name. And I've been involved in different ceremonies like that. Yeah.
Amazing traditions that bring people together, whether it's in families or companies or, in sports, whatever. I mean, bowl games are traditions. There's just so many traditions that have been going back for hundreds of years. So then the next one is you have rituals / norms, /team norms and company norms. And rituals are basic things that you get into habits or routines or, certain, like one of the things I really highlight for people are you need to do quarterly retreats. If you really are serious about culture, and sometimes that's for the entire company, sometimes it's for certain parts of the company, whatever it is, but you need to get people together in person. I know that technology is great and you can use a lot of other digital kinds of things, but I'm still a big believer there's nothing like an old-fashioned conversation with a group of people, right? So,
and your preference would be around a campfire if you could.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Outside. Yeah. I love the outdoors, right? Because that's where people. When you go outside, the walls come down. Yeah. And I love doing things all the way from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. I took a group of executives there to ropes courses to high performing. Bondurant School of High Performance Driving. I mean, it's just having adventures together. It goes back to what I said earlier about those shared activities / common language. Mm-hmm. And so in addition to that, there's 2 others that are really important that people often forget about. And one is what I like to call creating psychological safe space. You got to create psychological safe space for people to be themselves. Because if you don't create that psychological safe space, then people can't really connect. And when you do that, I think this is the last one. The last keystone is what I call deep human connection. And the only way to create deep human connection is to do whatever, all those other keystones create that. But deep human connection goes another step further. And that is you really have dialogue and conversations that come from the heart, not just the head. Mm-hmm. So those are some keystones that I find particularly useful and helpful to keep in mind. If you want to build a culture is you have that as a checklist, what are our symbols, right? What are we doing to create opportunities for people to have traditions and rituals and norms that you create, right? And those common bonds, and how if you just use those keystones, that's one of the best places to start. But I think you have to start at the very top, which is to have a true cause. A true cause,
yeah. Actually, there's another reference to that. Simon Sinek calls it the just cause. You have to have a just cause.
Interesting. Yes.
And if people accept it as a just cause, and then I think from your football, from the Utes football team, I take that sometimes the purpose doesn't have to be the outcome of the organization. It can be the impact on the people involved.
Absolutely. In fact, it's so interesting. I just had a dialogue with Kyle Whittingham about a year ago. I interviewed him for a book I'm writing about building culture called The Culture Builders. And I said, what's been the most meaningful and valuable aspects of coaching, right? And you'd think it would be the wins. And he didn't say that. He said it's the connection I've built with these young men, helping them create an experience through where they grow from boys to men, and to be able to have a connection with each other that lasts a lifetime.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I have to think that a coach like that would have a collection of alumni that he keeps track of.
Oh, for sure.
Like for the rest of their careers, whatever, and way past sports.
No doubt about it. Once you're a youth for life, man. That's the thing that's awesome about it is that they're all cheering for each other, and it's a tribe, man. It really is. You know, you're a youth, and no pun intended. You know, because it really is fascinating how tight they all are, of the alumni and everything else, and that's what's special about it is it really is very unique and pretty different than where the college world is going right now with a lot of it's all focused on individual achievement. It's all focused on personalities of coaches and that sort of thing. And I just really hope and you know that there's other organizations that can follow the example of the youths where they don't get caught up in that, even though there's a lot of colleges that pretty much become just little professional teams, and because of the ability they transfer portal and all that, where you know players can just move around. It's almost like they're free agents in
it's crazy,
and it's really unfortunate. And Utah is one of the few teams that have very few turnover. They have very, very few people that leave the program, and once they're there, they're there. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been successful. And it's the same thing in companies, right? They have turnover issues. And if you can build a level of connection where people don't want to leave, and I have stories upon stories on some companies that I've had a chance to interact with where literally they don't want to leave because of the culture. They just don't.
Well, and we talked last episode about sources of energy, and that's got to be one when people have that deep of a connection to the purpose. I want to bounce off some of these things, but first of all, I was going to ask you, when are you going to write your book? And then you told me not only that you're writing the book, but you told me the title of the book.
Yep.
So do you have a target for when that's going to be done?
I'm hoping be probably mid-year next year. Yep.
That's fantastic. So 2023 listeners, watch for Travis Anderson, The Culture Builders, and I'll try and squeeze it on my bookshelf here, my background. I want to pick up on shared activities.
Yeah.
I've been in a bunch of situations where people say, well, we're not really performing as a team, or we need a better relationship. And my experience has been the best way to get a relationship or to feel like a team is to do stuff. Mm-hmm. And it could be work. In fact, it's probably best that it's work.
Yes.
And here's the story. It didn't really happen to me. This is kind of how I feel about it is you know, when I was a little kid, we lived in a new neighborhood. And so there's a new kid moves in and the moms meet, and my mom has this mom over with her kid, and they say, you know, we think you should be friends. And I'm like, that kid looks weird. He talks funny. I'm not interested. Like, why would he be my friend? But, you know, mom says you have to be friends. And so you can sit and stare at each other. And that's only going to go so far. So you go in the backyard and you say, you know, I've always wanted to build a tree fort in this tree. And the kid says, my dad just built a fence. I got boards. And away you go. And in 15 minutes, you're friends.
Yep, absolutely.
But when under your mom's supervision to stare at each other and try and find common ground is impossible. And I really have felt so many times in professional settings, particularly when I was in the public service, and we were talking about the relationship between different organizations.
Yeah.
So different corporations, kind of a common interest, and we're supposed to work together. And I'm like, we just have to work together. Like there's no, we're not going to whiteboard this thing out. We're just going to do it or it's not going to happen. Do you agree with that?
100%. You know, it's like, you've got to have a vehicle to create that sense of teamwork, right? You've got to have, you do things together. That's why I love sports is you're doing stuff together, not just during the games, it's in the practices, right? But it's together and you can't do it. You can't do it on your own. You got to develop your own personal skills, but then you got to figure out how to work together, and you need to be able to have tangible ways of doing that. And to be honest with you, I think the physical kinds of things can make a huge impact. You know, that's why I love doing these outdoor types of retreats, because you're actually doing stuff together, right? We just did one up in Bear Lake a 3 weeks ago, and it was a group of a group of 12 top leaders of this organization, and we spent tons of time, you know, working through clarifying their vision and talking about, you know, business processes and such. But I always figure out how to involve different activities. Again, what's a ropes course, whatever. Well, the winter is kind of tough. You know, you got Bear Lake. There's 2 feet of snow out there, and you know we've done all kinds of crazy stuff like build snow caves and what have you. But this time we got real creative. We ended up, the last event for everybody, including 3 women, was to do a polar plunge. And we had this Bear Lake. It was like 15 degrees, and we had luckily a couple of Marines. I was part of their executive team from way back, but they went back into their Marine mentality because we didn't just jump in. What they did is that they all decided to just walk straight into the lake with their arms locked. Go as far as they could, or the tallest guy up to their chin, and the other guys would just hang on, right? And then they would come back. And what was so awesome, first of all, some of them went. One woman told me later, in fact, I got to give her a call. She says that probably was one of the most breakthrough experiences she's ever had, because she never imagined she could ever do something that tough.
That's crazy.
She went out there, and just as halfway out there, it was getting colder and colder, and people were shivering, you know, and just literally taking deep breaths, and just half of them didn't know if they could make it. And one of the Marines just bellowed out, just out of the blue, "Stay in the fight, stay in the fight." And all of a sudden they had to talk about energy. You could sense and feel that energy. They went all the way out, and then they came back, and just automatically it fell into place. The one of the Marines led the group back, and the other Marines stayed back and made sure everyone got there. And it wasn't orchestrated at all. Wow. But that's the thing that you're going to remember the rest of their lives, especially the women. And one of those women, literally tears in her eyes at the end of that retreat, looked at me and she said, "I will never forget that I can do things that I never thought I could do." Being out there in the cold with some Marines.
That's a bragging thing you can brag about for forever. And it's not about the bragging. It's about the when you need to, you can look inside and say, I can do.
Oh, you create those memories. That's what activities do, right?
Yeah. I had an experience where I was a guide, but not a leader of the boys.
Yeah.
On a glacier trip in the Canadian Rockies, and there was a kid there who shouldn't have come. Mm. He was on the spectrum. He didn't have any really friends there. He had 2 ingrown toenails, and he was a big kid, and he was out of shape.
Oh, wow.
So he got up to the alpine hut we were staying, never got on the glacier. And then we hike out in a snowstorm.
Oh, wow.
And immediately he falls at the back. So there's his 2 leaders, and I stayed at the back, and, you know, he's not with the boys again, picking our way through the snowstorm back to get picked up by a bus. And at a critical point, he said, "I think I have only 3 minutes of battery life left." You can imagine what kind of world this kid lived in.
Oh yeah.
One of the leaders got him talking about his favorite thing, which was comic book superheroes.
Oh wow.
Obscure ones, even, I think, and that kept him till the end. So then we got on the bus. I ended up sitting next to him. He never saw the mountains. His head was down the whole time. He wasn't hanging out with the guys. He was in pain the whole time. And he looked over and he said, that was the best experience of my life.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So what he missed was some of the connection, except his adult leaders were awesome. Right? They made him do it. They showed him he had reserves that he didn't think he had. And so, yeah, those kinds of experiences are fantastic. And I think we can get more value out of hard experiences at work.
Yeah.
If we connect it back to the purpose, we recognize the contributions different people make. And while it's good to get outside, sometimes you have to have that experience in the real trenches of the work that you're doing.
No doubt about it. That's the thing I love about corporate America. Corporate Canada, I guess, too.
Well, we'll see. Yeah.
Is it's a playground to change people's lives. That's the thing I love about culture. If you do it right, it can make a huge impact on people's livelihood and the way they are able to connect with other people. The sad part is pretty atypical. I just reading some statistics that 70% of people at work feel that they're not engaged at work. 70%.
And they're taking money from the company, and the company's paying them.
Yeah.
And what a waste on both sides, right?
What a waste.
Phenomenal waste.
And the potential to bring people together. As I said before, culture is all about connection and connecting with people and then uniting over a common cause.
So I want to jump down to the bottom of your list because we've got to wrap up here, Travis. This time goes so fast. You talked about deep human connection, and you said it has to get to the heart. So I'm tracking this because in my work on essential dynamics, I'm on the people side. I'm a process guy. I'm a strategy guy. I'm not as strong on the people side, and I know that. And I'm thinking, what's the question that I can ask organizations to think about where they would say, we need to make a change? And the question I came up with on the people side was, what are you doing to deserve the hearts of the people?
I love that.
Because so often the leaders that I've worked with over the years are trying to get people to do stuff.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out how to pay them differently so they'll do stuff, or how to communicate with them and, I don't know, like somehow manipulate them into doing stuff.
Yeah.
And to your point, the potential's there. People aren't engaged. They'd love to be engaged. And so I'm asking them, do you deserve the hearts of the people? And if you do, then figure out how to get them.
Yeah.
And I think you'll be blown away.
Absolutely. I love that. You got to win their hearts and minds, right? That's what you got to do. And that's what happened. That's why I love sports, is because I think it happens with the best teams is that the best coaches in football and basketball and any kind of sport are able to capture the hearts and minds of the players, and all the players do the same. Is that it's a work of the heart, and one of the things that's very unique about the retreats that I like to do is, we spend time strategizing and thinking about stuff and doing stuff that takes intellectual brain power. But I'll tell you, some of the most powerful and the things that I remember the most are the shared activities, and then we do what I call a deep dive. And a deep dive typically happens, usually it takes about 2 to 3 hours, usually with a group of 10 to 12 people, where we talk about questions that usually are never talked about, such as, what was it like growing up? Right? What was your biggest childhood challenge? What was a key defining moment that changed the way you think about life? Those kind of questions. I could go on. But usually 2.5 hours into that, with guys that are pretty tough, including the Denver Bronco top 10, 12 players, the Denver Broncos, that thought they were the only ones that came from a pretty difficult background. I'll never forget, at 1:30 in the morning, it took 5 hours to get through that process. And there wasn't a dry eye in that place, because they all realized that they came from places that no one ever knew, They talk about how they came home and they saw their brothers covered up on the porch because they just got shot. And all they saw was the red sneakers showing out. And their parents, a lot of times, most of them have only one parent. And I'll never forget, one person told me that, he was 7 years old. He pretty much had to take care of his three little brothers, who was 3, 4, and 5, because his mom was strung out. And the only way that he was able to take care of those kids is they had a McDonald's in the corner, and he knew exactly what time they'd throw out the stuff from the breakfast and whatever. They'd go out there in the garbage containers and bring back some old McMuffins and stuff and put it in the fridge. And that's what they'd live off for the next 3 days. And when you hear those kind of stories, another guy's saying, "Oh my goodness," and they just recognize that that football was the only way out of that kind of a life. And for the one that makes it into football, there's 20 others that don't. And for me, that deep human connection that you create by sharing that kind of stuff is stuff that really, quite frankly, I think had a lot to do with the fact that when we start having these retreats 3 years before the 2015 Super Bowl, when Peyton Manning took them to the championship, and they got stronger every year because of that bond of those top 12 players. Once you get those top 12 players, everyone else follows them, just like an executive team. I spend 80% of my time working with the executive team because they set the tone for everybody else.
So I think what you're saying is that's possible for any leadership team willing to do the work.
Absolutely. That's what it requires. Got to be willing to do the work. And you have to be willing to let your ego and your pride step down, and you need to step up with your heart. That's what it's all about in my mind. And it's so hard to do in an environment mostly where that's not necessarily something that people are used to. It's out of the box. But I got to tell you, it's the most worthwhile work that I've ever had a chance to do. I can tell you that I have memories that I'll never, that I'll always cherish for the rest of my life because of that.
Well, Travis, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today and giving us a tiny dose of culture by design. Remind us where people can find you.
Well, probably the easiest way is I have a website called culturebuilders.com, and love anybody to reach out if you need to even call me. I'm happy to just, I know a lot of people are real hesitant to give numbers out, but if anyone has any questions or wants to talk about culture, my number is 801-550-6049, and be happy to talk to anybody that has interest, because it's a topic I never get tired of talking about.
Hey, thanks. One of the great things about those Utah numbers is you think they're toll free. So, well, thanks so much, Travis. Thanks, Bryn Griffiths, for helping in the studio. I'm Derek Hudson, and till next time, consider your quest.